Welcome to the Live Well, Perform Better podcast. My name is David Duggan and I'm the director of Below the Line, an Irish-based consultancy specialising in helping people, teams and organisations raise their levels of consciousness, inner potential and performance. I am part of a team made up of experts from the worlds of business, elite sport, adventure and health and well-being. We are coaches, mentors and advisors to some of the world's biggest companies and organisations, as well as smaller businesses, entrepreneurs and people looking to make their mark in the world. Our guiding mantra at Below the Line is live well, perform better. What does that mean, you might ask? Good question. Maybe the easiest way to describe it from our perspective is finding the formula that works for you when it comes to things like looking after your physical and mental health, running your business, developing your career, leading your people, or simply being able to show up as brilliantly as possible into your own life, both for yourself and those around you. That's why each week I sit down with a member of our team or an invited guest for a conversation that focuses on the question, what do the words live well, perform better mean to you? This question is a way into exploring with people from a range of different backgrounds, industries and disciplines. What are the practices, techniques, habits or ideas that they use to help them to show up and be at their best in all areas of their lives? Whether that's as CEOs, leaders or managers, or as parents, family members or friends. We keep it short and sweet so that you can extract all the good stuff and get on with the rest of your day and hopefully put some of our knowledge, experience and expertise into play for yourself. This week I'm delighted to be joined by another very special guest, Paul Overy. Paul is a financial coach and planner who is passionate about helping people get the proper financial advice and guidance that they need to help them achieve what he terms financial well-being. A long-time advocate for truly independent financial advice, Paul spoke to me about his career and the many years spent helping people get the financial information that is most relevant to them, as well as what motivates and drives him to do what he does. This is a must-listen conversation for anyone looking to learn about the common mistakes and pitfalls that many of us make when it comes to money and financial planning, as well as what we can do to take greater control of our finances and plan with more confidence and greater clarity. You can subscribe at www.belowtheline.ie, where you can stay up to date with our podcast, as well as our exclusive online events and sessions, including our Press Pause coaching community. Thanks for listening and see you next week. Before we start this week's episode, I'd like to take a minute to let you know about the next in-person event we are hosting on the 2nd and 3rd of March 2023 in the beautiful Brook Lodge Hotel and Spa in Macredon Village, County Wicklow. Our first Elemental Leadership experience took place earlier in October 2022 and it went so well that we decided to do it all again. As we all know, the past few years have been a mixed experience for us all. For some, it has been about stress management, coping and surviving, both personally and professionally, while for others, it has been a time for recovery, reflection and self-care. Either way, we all know and can see that yet again our world is changing, and with it, so must our mindset, our attitude and our energy, which is why we're offering you the opportunity to recharge your leadership, rediscover your performance edge and re-inspire yourself to successfully meet the moment and challenge of right now. At the Elemental Leadership Experience, you will be a participant in 2 days of inspiring sessions, workshops and talks, facilitated by the Below the Line team of expert business and performance coaches, all while enjoying wonderful accommodation and hospitality in a beautiful part of the world, with a group of like-minded, success-orientated people. Places are limited, so if this sounds like something you want to be a part of, head over to www.belowtheline.ie for full details on how you can reserve your place and avail of our early bird rate, an offer which extends until the 1st of December 2022. Thanks for listening, and now on with the show. But I'll just kick off with the first question, which is, Paul, please tell me, why do you do what you do?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is, if you'd met me when I was 15 or 16 and you asked me what I wanted to do, I wouldn't have said, I want to be a financial advisor, David. It's something I kind of fell into in a manner of speaking. What I wanted to be was a computer programmer as I left school. And one of the ways of doing that then was to get a job in one of the bigger companies as a trainee programmer. And one came up in New Ireland Assurance Company. I applied for it. I got down to the last two, but then I didn't get the job. And when I rang to find out why I didn't get the job, I was told, well, it went to somebody who was already in the company. So I said to them, well, is there any job going in that company then that I could have so that I'd be in a better position when the next trainee programmer role came up? And the answer was yes. And I became a maturities claims clerk with the New Ireland Assurance Company. Yeah, and I would have never told you, had you asked me at 15 what I wanted to be, I would have never have answered, I want to be a maturities claims clerk. But that's where I ended up. And I was there for about a year. In that time, I met the advisors who were working for the company. They looked better than me. They dressed better than me. They had company cars. They had expense accounts. And they seemed to be getting on very well. So I thought, well, if there's no programmer's job coming, why don't I go for that? And I went for it. And I became a financial advisor virtually overnight. As I say, without ever intending to be. That was, I worked in that role for quite some time. And then I had a eureka moment. In effect, the eureka moment was that I realized, quite a bit into my financial advisory career, I didn't seem to be getting any richer. My clients didn't seem to be getting any richer, which begged the question, who's getting richer? And the answer was the institution I worked for. I realized that while I carried a business card and presented myself as a financial advisor, what I was actually doing was selling a range of pre-packaged financial products. Products that, in this case, were manufactured by New Ireland, but could have as easily been manufactured by Irish Life or Zurich or whoever. And products that had the profit of the institution that manufactured them already enshrined in their terms and conditions. My profit as a salesman already enshrined in the terms and conditions and guaranteed effectively by those terms and conditions, realizing then that the client's profit was necessarily in no better than third place. First, the institution, second, the salesman, third, the client. And effectively, the return for the institution and me were guaranteed, but the client was the only one taking risk. So I felt that that was probably a reason why, the financial advice system wasn't really working and continues not to work. If you look at wealth statistics in Ireland, a vast majority of people who retire in Ireland, for example, are dependent upon the state. And yet they've been exposed to a whole financial planning system for all their lives. They've engaged with them, they've bought pension funds, they've saved money, they've bought their home, and so on, and yet they end their lives state dependent. So I felt that probably one of the reasons for that statistic was the conflict of interest effectively that existed. Financial advisor is defined in Irish law, David, as someone licensed to sell regulated financial product. So even in the law of the land, what you and I understand as advisor is defined as a salesman. And that meant that, while I wanted to give impartial advice, I felt I couldn't in that environment. And that's why I do what I do today. I work with my clients in a fee environment, so I can guarantee complete impartiality. I don't have to sell them anything to get paid. And the beauty of a fee environment from their perspective is because they see it, they also look for the benefits greater than the costs. It's easy for them to judge benefits greater than costs. So, and I find that is a much more lucrative environment for the client. It is almost as lucrative for me. So, I haven't had to, downgrade my income to do this. And it removes those conflicts of interest that I think are, infect the whole of the industry almost.
What does the layperson or the ordinary person on the street get wrong about financial advice, about planning for their future? What's the common challenges or mistakes that people make?
Well, I think there are probably two big ones and then a number of little ones. But the two big ones are, failing to get truly impartial financial advice. Now, that sounds a bit like an ad for me, and maybe it is. But I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the problem with much of the financial advice, as I said a moment ago, is that it isn't advice at all. It's people selling stuff. Whether that stuff is a mortgage or a pension fund or a life insurance policy or whatever. And the other thing, so a lack of impartial advice or biased advice is the predominant way people get advice at the moment. And the second thing I would suggest is isolated advice. Most of the people I meet as potential clients have 5 or 6 financial advisors in their corner. They have an accountant, they have a lawyer, they have a pensions broker, they have a brother-in-law who worked for New Ireland in 1973 and sold them some sort of policy, and so on and so forth. And that means there's no joined up thinking in the financial plans, because these advisors never talk to each other. They never meet. If you're the client, David, you're going to your accountant at one time of the year, you're talking to your pensions guy at another time of the year, and you're getting, silo-based, isolated advice pertaining to one particular area of your life, as opposed to the whole thing. The best example I can give for that is, imagine €100,000 fell out of the sky. It's yours, it's in a nice bundle, you don't have to hand it into the Gardaí, but you take it to your bank manager and you ask him or her, what to do with it. And they tell you, and they have a whole bunch of reasons why they're right. But you don't take necessarily that advice. You go to your accountant this time and you get another piece of advice and a whole bunch of reasons why they're right. Or you take it to your pensions broker and you get a third piece of advice and a whole bunch of reasons why they're right. And of course, the question is, which one is right? And the answer is, in my view, they're all right, because they're working on their agenda, not your agenda. The bank manager's job is to de-risk his bank book. The accountant's job is to keep you out of prison. The pensions bloke's job is to give you, to sell you pensions. So you will get 3 different pieces of advice. They're working, as I say, on their agenda. My view is they have to be working on your agenda. And if they're working on your agenda, and you took that 100,000 to those 3 people, they would all give the same advice, because it would be pertaining to David as opposed to the bank or the insurance company or the revenue. So stop taking biased advice and get an impartial advisor that will take a global view of your financial world as the advice is formulated. First of all, will truly understand your goals, your agenda, be they short, medium, and longer term. Often with financial advisors, they talk about retirement, as if that's the only, piece of planning you have to do. But if you're in your late 30s or early 40s, you have to educate your children. You have to, go on holidays. There's an awful lot of expense between now and retirement. And yet all of that is ignored when you focus solely on retirement and talk to a pensions broker.
Our strapline in Below the Line, as you know, is live well, perform better. And I always ask this question of our guests because that strapline runs the risk, I think, of being frustratingly vague. So just from your own perspective, what does that strapline mean to you?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. And I think at times straplines being vague is a good thing, because it often leads to questions, doesn't it? And, that's exactly what, marketing is about, is trying to engage people. So suitably vague is a good thing in my view. But to answer your question, I mean, on the live well side, I tend to look at something like the Hippocratic Oath and say, what that oath has as its core: to do no harm. And I truly believe that I live well by doing no harm to others. So that would be one of the things I would say. I mean, I'm often, friends of mine will describe me as brutally honest. And I think that runs in my family, because I've read things about my forefathers that, they also were brutally honest. So maybe I inherited it. But I do feel that being honest with people, being honest with myself, being honest with my friends, being honest with my family, being honest with my clients is the key, is what helps me sleep at night and what helps me live well. From the other perspective, perform better. I'll quote the old South African golfer, Gary Player, who was famously asked why he was winning so much and why he was so lucky. And his answer was, it appears the more I practice, the luckier I get. And I truly believe that practice is how you perform better. Taking time away from the day job to do that practice. Often in business, I find that we tend to practice on the job. We go and we learn a new technique or a new way of putting things. And then instead of sitting in front of, a camera like this or in front of a mirror and practicing it, we go and practice it on the next client we get. If you can go back to Gary Player's sport of golf, when you and I watched Rory.Paul nearly win the British Open a couple of weeks ago, we're watching about 5% of the time and effort that Rory.Paul has put in to being as good at golf as he is. We don't want to watch, his 2 hours in the gym every morning. We don't want to watch him, hit 3,000 golf balls on the practice tee or whatever, whatever his routine is. But we all recognize that if he hadn't done all of that, we wouldn't be watching at all, because he wouldn't be a professional golfer. So practice, practice in terms of your presentations to clients. If we look at the business side, practice. And even as in advance of this recording, I was practicing because I was, because I wanted to be the best. I wanted to perform at the best of my abilities. So live well, Hippocratic oath, do no harm and be honest, perform as well as you can, practice. And then what? Practice some more. My father was a sales trainer in his working life, David, and he had a phrase, it has to flow out of you like water over pebbles. That flow of it's easy. There's no difficulty here in terms of answering questions or giving a presentation or whatever. And I like that phrase, it must flow like water over pebbles. And that's what I practice to make sure that, when I do perform in business, it's like water over pebbles.
Yeah. And if I link back to what you were saying about your career and what's led you to what you're doing now, it also sounds to me like there's a strongly held belief in what you're doing now, which comes out of your experience. So you're trying to almost combine the two things, which is strongly held belief and conviction about the work you do with that, that practice to be able to just, communicate as effectively, as smoothly, like water over pebbles as well. Is that right?
That would be absolutely right. I mean, one of my friends that I think quite well called me, somebody who needs a cause. And my cause is the delivery of truly, the best possible financial advice and guidance that I can give. And I know I couldn't do that by simply selling product. There had to be a change, and certainly the change I made of going towards the fee environment, effectively charging for my time and expertise. And when it comes to the products, David, in many occasions, giving those products away for free. One of the things people maybe not know is that every commission bearing financial product out there, whether it's a bank product, whether it's an insurance product, or wherever it comes from, there is a nil commission version. You just need an advisor who will allow you access to that. The general public can't walk into Irish Life and say, give me the nil commission pension, please. They will get the commission version, and the commission will go into a central account for marketing or something like that. Whereas you need a professional advisor who's willing to say to the insurance company, here's my client, here's what they want to do, and by the way, no commission should be paid on this product. So, but right back to your question, yes, I mean, I firmly believe that what I'm doing is the right thing to do. And I'm hopeful that because I do it the way I do it, because other people have followed suit from, in across the financial advisory world, that ultimately, if you talk about legacy, I will have had some influence on producing change in this industry that is much needed.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of touched on my next question, which was, are you an outlier of sorts in the financial advice sector or area?
I think the answer has to be yes. I think the only time when I talk about, like I'm talking to you, the only time I get a negative reaction to what I'm saying is from the incumbent industry, not from my clients. My clients are, will listen to what I have to say and say, well, that makes sense. That makes sense that, if products are coming to market with the profit of the institution, with the profit of the salesman already giving, placing my profit and necessarily no better than third place. That's fairly simple stuff in many ways and hard to argue with. But yes, is the answer. The place I get the most aggression, if you like, from what I'm saying is from the industry itself. I stood up years ago. There was a broker conference many years ago, and it was at the time when commission on products was being, the central bank had passed new legislation to make it mandatory to declare commission to a client in the quotation that you give them. And there was lots of arguments about how this was unfair. And I stood up when the microphone goes around and you stand up to make a comment, and I said who I was, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think the problem is disclosing commission. I think the problem is justifying it. And I was nearly hung, David. I was lucky to get out of the room alive in many ways. But I believe that to be true. And, there's, that old saying, if you want to hurt somebody, tell them a lie. If you want to really hurt them, tell them the truth. And I whatever the negative reaction in that room was at that time, I think if you talk to those people in complete privacy, they would say, well, he was right. I didn't like it, but it was right.
My next question is, again, another one I always ask our guests, which is, what practices or habits or behaviors do you engage in just to help you to live well and perform better? You've touched on some of this already when you mentioned practice itself, but I'm just wondering, is there anything else that springs to mind when I ask you that question?
A couple of things. One is, I'm a goal-driven individual. I like to see what I'm trying to achieve. So I set, myself quite a number of goals, across my life, and not just financial, of course. Spend time with my family, and all of those, the various things, educate myself. So, but what I do is not only set the goals, but I share them. I share them with my wife, I share them with my family, and I find that gives me the focus to truly drive on. If I've promised myself something, I'll make a lot of effort to achieve it. If I've promised my wife and family something, I'll make even more effort to achieve it, or that's what I've found. So goals and setting goals is promising to achieve those goals is one, I think, of those practices. I was introduced to another one by my wife, Jenny, who told me quite a while ago, that before she goes to sleep at night, she makes herself think of two things in her life that she's really grateful for, whatever they might be, the trip to the beach that we did with our 6-year-old that day, or whatever it might be. So I found that an excellent discipline. As I go to sleep, I'm focusing on the positives rather than the negatives. And recognizing that no matter what the problems I have in my life, they are small and insignificant in comparison to lots of other people around the world. I have a happy personal relationship. I have good friends. My father is still with us. He's 92. I have 4 children that I love dearly and I have a great relationship with. well, I have 3.5 great relationships, to be honest. I'm one teenager at the moment that's causing me a few problems. So, goals and promises, being grateful for what I do have. And then I think the final thing in terms of, if you like, perform better, is the constant accumulation of new knowledge. Things are changing. I'm not a clairvoyant, David, but I can guarantee you one thing: tomorrow will be different than today. So, things will change. You will have good periods of time in your life. You'll have bad periods of time in your life. So, the final thing I would say is spend time with those you love. As I heard fairly recently, somebody tell me, nobody lies on their deathbed wishing they'd worked more. We wish we'd spent more time with our wives or children. We wish we'd spent more times with our father when he was still here. Those kind of things. They're, I imagine, the things that we lament as we all shuffle off this mortal coil. I've tried, I used to work 17, 18 hours a day. I used to get up in the morning before the kids and the rest of the family woke and be gone out of the house. I'd be back to the house after they'd gone to sleep. I justified that by the promise of a future. This will be all worth it when I'm able to stop working and spend more time with them. And then I think I mentioned to you before, my younger brother, unfortunately, at 42, was diagnosed with a brain tumor and died. And David was my brother, and David was in the same industry as me. He kept the same hours as me. He was promising his family it'll be all worth it in the end, in the future. And then, of course, his future never arrived. So that fundamentally changed me, David, in that it said, I could contemplate losing a parent because they're old, if you like, or older. But when you lose a younger brother like that, and he was my only brother, so it meant that I started to look at the time I was giving to my job and say, well, nothing is guaranteed. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. What's guaranteed is right now. So let's go to the beach right now. Let's spend some time. So I will often have a day where I get up in the morning, I work for 3 or 4 hours, especially if the sun is shining. Then I go to the beach with my 6-year-old for a couple of hours. Then I come back and do another 3 or 4 hours. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does. Yeah, thank you very much. And if you like, taking that broader perspective now and turning the lens outwards, if you like, from your perspective, what are the main performance or business challenges that you see being faced by people right now, or maybe even with that financial advisor hat on or lens on, what do you see as being challenges for people in that area?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing to say is it's hard. That's a hard question to answer generically, isn't it? And I think, that leads into what I say, that the problem with much of the financial advice world is it's a one size fits all world. Whether you're 16 or 60, whether you're married or single, whether you're, whatever your circumstances, if you go into an Irish Life or a New Ireland or whatever, you're going to get sold the same type of product. So this is the one size fits all. And just like there isn't, there's no one size fits all in any, across a range of businesses. So your listeners are people in business, very different businesses with very different challenges. As you say, if I focus in on my part of the business world, I think it's easier to answer as to what are the challenges. The first challenge is actually sourcing truly impartial financial advice. As I say, when somebody can hand you a business card that says independent financial advisor on it, but what that means is that person is licensed to sell regulated financial product. That isn't what you and I read, is if we read those words, independent financial advisor. So there's a kind of, a cloak of secrecy over that whole world that we need to draw back, and we need to get to truly impartial advice. That's the first thing. The second thing is we need this joined up thinking I was mentioning. We need to bring the advice of our financial planning team, if you like, our accountant and our bank manager, and we need to bring them together in some way. The best analogy, maybe if I could share an analogy with you that I've used for that, is the orchestra. Imagine that these guys play musical instruments. So your accountant is your piano player and your bank manager is your percussionist, and your broker is your flautist or whatever. And here's how you talk to your orchestra. You never talk to them as a group. You go into the pit every now and again, you talk to them as individuals, and you say something like, I know nothing about playing the piano, whatever you think yourself. Or I know nothing about playing the drums, whatever you think. And you go back and you sit in your seat and they start to play. And the piano player plays Rachmaninoff's Fifth. The drummer plays Santa Claus is Coming to Town. The flautist plays something else. And you're sitting there with your hands over your ears going, oh my God, these are professional musicians. By joining up the thinking, effectively, you're writing sheet music for that orchestra. And you're going to speak to them as a group. You might not speak to them as a group. You might speak to them as individuals still, but you're giving them the same sheet music. Here's what I'm trying to achieve. Now, based on that, what is the best advice you can give me? So source impartial advice. Stop this isolationist planning if you can at all. And, beyond that, you look at things like set goals, real financial goals. The financial goal of I want to be rich or I want to retire at age 50, the problem with those goals is they're vague. It's hard to put a number upon them. But, I would respectfully suggest that the vast majority of us living in the Western world have the same financial goal. And that is the achievement of financial freedom. Getting to a stage where your assets can recreate your income without the necessity to continue working. Now, I've never said that to anybody who said that's a rubbish idea, Paul. Mostly when I say that, people go, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Now, the thing is, for you, David, that's a different figure than it is for me, than it is for your listeners. But the beauty of it is if I can find out, or you can find out what your lifestyle income requirements are, and you can tell me when you wish to target financial freedom, I can tell you the number. I can give you a number. If you were asked one of my clients what their financial ambition was and they were inclined to answer it, you would get an answer something like, I'm trying to accumulate 1.45 million in income producing assets by the time I'm 55. And that 1.45 million is their number. And the beauty of that is it's clear, it's relatively easy to calculate, and it gives you a clear financial goal. There's your sheet music. You go back to your team of financial advisors and you say, this is what I'm trying to achieve. Now, that's the end goal. Along the roadway, you have, I want to educate my children, I want to go on holidays, I want to, all of those things can feed into that. But once you have that number, you have a very clear goal and a very clear timeline in which to achieve it. And the next thing is to set about implementing that. And the final thing I would say in this world is stop overpaying taxation. The PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, got a report from Revenue not so long ago, which said that Irish taxpayers routinely fail to claim €500 million a year in tax concessions we are due. Now, €500 million a year is an awful lot of money, isn't it? You can imagine we'd all be much better off if we kept the €500 million a year than not. And yet, you wonder why that is the case. How can that be when we have thousands and thousands, for example, of accountants whose job it is, many of us think, is to help us save tax? But I think there's a misunderstanding here of the role of accountants. Most business owners I meet for the first time, David, whether they would express this or not, would have the attitude, if I could pay less tax, my accountant would have told me so. But that's not necessarily the case. Because if you actually look at the role of one's accountant, and especially true for those who own and run their own limited companies, the accountant's statutory obligation is to the revenue authorities, not to you, not to the company, to the revenue authorities. He has another obligation to the revenue authorities, he or she, but beyond that, they have no obligations at all. I was talking to a group of accountants in Douglas, before, when we were all allowed to go around the country and talk to groups of people, a couple of years ago, and I was saying exactly this. And I said to them, so if I went out and asked 100 of your clients what you do, most of them would answer, help me save tax. And they're nodding at me, the audience. And I said, and your job is to help them pay tax. And they're nodding at me. There's a fundamental misunderstanding of the role of our accountants. Our accountants' job is to help us pay tax and to do so in a timely fashion to keep us out of prison, as I said earlier. Your job, if you have a right, David has a right, and every listener has a right to pay as little tax as legitimately possible. But you must exercise that right. Nobody will do it for you. The revenue won't ring you up and say, by the way, you forgot to claim this, or by the way, did you think of claiming that? That's up to you. And that's why, certainly in the work I do, tax is at the center of most of the work we do, because tax, if you think about it, is the greatest financial liability in your life, in my life, in every listener's life. And if it's the greatest liability, it's therefore the greatest obstacle to achieving our financial ambitions. So control taxation legitimately, David, not illegitimately. There's a very bad joke in the tax world which says, what's the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance? And the answer is 6 feet, the width of a prison wall. Evasion is illegal. Tax evasion is breaking the law. Tax avoidance is using the law to your best possible advantage, using the law to pay as little tax as legitimately possible.
Could I ask you, obviously outside of this podcast, you and I have spoken before, but something I know you're very passionate about, and I just love for the people listening to this just to get your perspective on this, but this idea of financial well-being, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think obviously the ultimate financial well-being is the one I described a moment ago, which is the financial freedom, getting to a stage where your assets can recreate your income without the necessity to work. But in the interim, the financial well-being is being sure you're doing the right thing, I think. Is being, I think a lot of stresses and strains, I think it's said that, the most stressful thing a human being can do is divorce. The second most stressful thing is move house. But the third most stressful thing, and one that affects an awful lot of people in the Western world, is the worry about money. And worry is about not knowing. So I would suggest that, you along that journey to the ultimate financial freedom is to take control of your money. Know what your liabilities are. Excuse me. Know what your what your values are. Try and understand the relationship between risk and reward in terms of the way particular investment assets perform. And in a way, that's what I bring to my clients. I bring that kind of peace of mind. In that, the beauty of numbers is if you can break every financial decision down into what is its cost, what is the benefit, and what is the risk, if you can get that information, then you can make far superior financial decisions. I'm not making my clients financial decisions, David. I'm giving them the information so that they can make better decisions themselves. And I think that would be the key to a financial life that doesn't cause you too much misery. That is, that you have control over, as much control as it's possible. We can't control the economy. We can't control the stock market. Well, some people can. Maybe they're big enough. People like Warren Buffett have a way of influencing the stock market that you and I just don't have. But what we can control is how we operate and how we plan ourselves. And having, an impartial advisor at your side that understands your financial goals, short, medium, and longer term, and then helps you put a financial plan together to deliver them, that is, the peace of mind. I'll give you one last statistic, if I may. There was the U.S. Treasury does a survey of all retiring U.S. citizens every year. It sends out a survey. It gets about a 5% response rate, which it says gives it about 95% accuracy. You know the way polling works, and across the kind of nation. And in 2012, they introduced a new question to that questionnaire. And that question was, did you have a personal financial plan? Since that introduction, David, those who answer yes to that question, on average, accumulate twice as much wealth as those who answer no. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I can't explain to you when human beings write things down, commit them to paper, they get done more often than not. And I'm sure there's a psychologist, out there who could explain that to you and me. But what I do know is there is ample evidence in history that if you write things down, they get done far more often than if you don't. So I think the key to financial peace of mind is the personal financial plan. And going back to what I was saying earlier, that basically outlines your financial agenda between now and the day you shuffle off this mortal coil, and then informs all the financial advice you take in.
You may have preempted my last question slightly, but that's okay. My last question is, what's the one piece of advice you would give to anyone looking to live well and perform better? And again, from your own perspective.
Well, I think you're right. I've touched on it. I think if money, worrying about money, whether it's it's weird. People worry about money when they have too little. Believe it or not, people also worry about money when they have too much. But most of us, of course, worry about money because we're unsure of what the future might bring. So I would say to those people, get yourself the personal financial plan. Populate it with what you and your family want. So not what I want, not what your bank manager wants, not what your accountant wants, what you want. One of the things I do when I meet somebody for the first time is, having got that information from them, I show them how far towards those goals they've already traveled. So based on what you've done already, based on your current pension scheme or whatever it might be, here's the goals you say you have. Here's the ones I believe you can achieve. And here, in chronological order, are the ones you can't yet achieve. So if we go back to the 100 grand falling out of the sky, if you have that, you know what to do with the 100 grand. You just look at your plan. You go, oh, okay, it's the kids' education is the next thing that I need to tick that box. Or it's the house in Tuscany, or it's the world cruise, or whatever it might be. So that's the piece of advice. Get yourself a personal financial plan. Write your own financial agenda, and then make sure that the advice you take into your world, is heavily influenced by that agenda as opposed to any other.
Last question, just before we go, where can people contact you or find you if they want to get in touch?
Well, I work at the moment. I work in a business called Dempsey Financial Solutions, and I have, they can get onto the Dempsey Financial Solutions website if they want. But I think the best place to contact me often, David, is on LinkedIn. That's where I communicate mostly with people in the early stages. Most of the people so LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn and message me, and I'd be delighted to message just to say, if I'm allowed a little bit of an advertisement, I meet any prospective client on a no full, no fee basis. So it costs nothing but an hour of our time to have a chat. At the end of that, I will go away and I will put in writing back to them the service I think best suits them and the fee that they would be asked to pay for that service. So giving them complete transparency. Here's what I can do. Here's what it costs. Now, make a decision. If you want to proceed, let's go. And if you don't, no foul, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Paul, there's been loads in that for anyone listening around just even thinking about that idea of financial well-being, of thinking about goals, of thinking about the where they're at and the end goal that they have in mind for themselves. So I want to say thanks very, very much for sharing your time and just being so insightful and generous and informative and passionate about your subject matter. It's always great to have someone where you can feel that just flowing out of them, like water over pebbles, as the man says. Yeah. So thanks very much.
No, thank you, as I say, for the opportunity. I'm delighted to do it, and I hope it leads to something more for you and me and the audience.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard and want to stay in touch with us, then please head over to www.belowtheline.ie to subscribe to our mailing list and to explore our upcoming programs and events, including our Elemental Leadership Experience, coming up on the 2nd and 3rd of March 2023. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening.